Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'll be going over the waiver wire targets for Week 4. So I'll be going over each of the four, I guess 5 major positions: quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, and then defense. Going over which players I think you should be looking to add to your rosters ahead of Week 4. It was a wild Week 3. A lot of crazy things happened. I think we learned a lot more about what we can expect out of teams in the NFL and players going forward. It's always great to get more and more of a sample size over the course of the season. That way we can use that to sort of, take that going forward with us so that we can make sure we're making better decisions each and every week. I think there are a lot of players to talk about here. Not necessarily a top-heavy week, but I think a lot of really solid players that should be added here. So a lot of names to talk about. I'll try and touch on all of them for a decent amount of time. If there's anybody I didn't mention, feel free to let me know in the comments, or any specific drop ad questions, again, let me know in the comments below. Love interacting with you guys there. It's a lot of fun for me, of course. I don't really try to touch on fab suggestions as well here, just because it's really dependent based off of your league. But if you have any specific questions regarding fab, again, let me know in the comments. I'll be able to give you a little bit more context-driven answers as well. So yeah, that being said, let's just get into it. It should be a lot of fun. Starting things off with the quarterback position, really only two ads I think to talk about here. I'll start things off with Sam Darnold, who just looks really good. It's tough to ignore at this point. He gets a tough-ish matchup in Week 4 against the Green Bay Packers, but he's looked absolutely fantastic. There's a case to be made for him to be front-running the MVP discussion right now. If he goes into Green Bay and wins that game, I'm going to be super impressed. He's obviously got the weapons. You have Justin Jefferson on your team. It's going to make the weapons just look great. Should get Jordan Addison at some back at any point here. TJ Hawkinson will come back as well. The weapons are only going to improve here. Sam Darnold should get more and more comfortable in the system as well here. So tough to really ignore that. I think he's got to be rostered at this point. He's the quarterback 4 on the season right now, so we can't ignore that 3 weeks in. Andy Dalton, can't ignore that either. Came out and was the first quarterback this season to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the same game. It's a revenge game against Cincinnati in Week 4. He might just be the GOAT. I'd say that jokingly, obviously, but it looked really good. Did a lot with this offense, but Bryce Young couldn't do anything. The weapons there are decent. You've got Chuba looking really good. Deontay Johnson balled out. Xavier Legette's an exciting young player. Mingo's a high draft pick from just last year as well. And the Cincinnati defense looks absolutely awful. They just got carved up by the Washington Commanders. I think Dalton's a guy you can stream next week if you want to. So both these guys should be rostered. If I needed a start just for next week, I would go Dalton. But if I needed a replacement more long-term, I think I prefer Sam Darnold to Dalton going forward, like on a long-term basis. Next up, we got the running back position here. I will start things off with my favorite ad of the week of Bucky Irving. He's just got a chance to be the running back 1 in Tampa Bay. There's a pretty high chance he's rostered in your league. Any league that's taking things seriously right now likely has him rostered. But if they don't, he needs to be added right now. It just looks a lot better than Rachaad White so far. To be fair to Rachaad White, he is playing through an injury, so I don't want to necessarily knock him too much for that. I think Rachaad White's a talented player, and he's going to be involved going forward. But Todd Bowles came out today and said Bucky Irving's deserving of more touches. You can just look at that based off of the efficiency we've seen between these two backs. Bucky Irving's a good player. This is a good offense in Tampa Bay. If he could ever get the clear role in Tampa Bay, that'd be fantastic. And if we ever saw Rachaad White go down, Bucky Irving would be just as good as what Rachaad White was last season. I truly believe that. So Irving's a must-add in every single league. Rico Dowdle needs to be added as well. A top 30 back needs the last 2 weeks, believe it or not. Seemingly the RB1 in Dallas. He's just better than Ezekiel Elliott. He's the guy that needs to be added. He should be rostered in pretty much every league because Dallas is not as bad as they've been each of the last 2 weeks. Emmanuel Wilson, the backup running back for the Green Bay Packers, needs to be added. Scored a touchdown this week, split touches with Josh Jacobs. He's a Josh Jacobs injury away from being potentially a workhorse running back in a good offense, and we don't really know necessarily. This could be more of a timeshare than we necessarily thought. He was, he got like 15 touches to Josh Jacobs' 16 this last week. Not saying that's going to go forward or carry on going forward. This was a game where the Packers were winning pretty handily, so could have been a product of that, but Emmanuel Wilson needs to at least get a look. Should probably be rostered in more leagues. Roschon Johnson was very involved in this one. Was way more efficient than DeAndre Swift, who averaged 1.5 yards per carry this game, averaged 1.3 coming into the game. This was the best matchup for running backs going into Week 3 here, and DeAndre Swift just couldn't do anything with it. He looks absolutely awful. This looks like a classic Miles Sanders situation from last season, a running back who gets paid, goes to a new team, and just isn't good. It'll take a few weeks, but they're going to shift off of DeAndre Swift at some point. It's just malpractice from the organization to keep giving DeAndre Swift touches. We're going to see other running backs in this team get involved. We should see Roschon Johnson, maybe some Khalil Herbert get more involved. I know Travis Homer was inactive in this game, so that could be part of why we saw more Roschon Johnson, but he's a better player than DeAndre Swift at this point. Khalil Herbert probably is as well. He's a really talented runner. Both those guys should be more involved going forward, and I think they both honestly should be rostered because Swift is on his way out in this team. Braylon Allen, need to highlight him. He's just a really good player. He's getting a ton of work behind Brees Hall, obviously not going to be super reliable on a weekly basis while Brees Hall is still playing, but he's really good. He's basically a better version of Tyler Algier, where he's a really talented player on what should be a good to average offense. He's playing behind a stud, so there's no real ceiling there without an injury, but you could play him in a pinch if you absolutely needed to. And then if things broke right for Braylon Allen, if obviously Brees Hall were to go down, he could potentially be a top 5 back. So he needs to be rostered for sure. Just going to highlight handcuffs as well. Any handcuffs, so guys like, obviously we've got Tyler Algier, Trey Benson, Bucky Irving, not necessarily Bucky Irving, but Tank Bigsby, those kinds of guys. All those guys need to be rostered if you're, especially in deeper leagues. Those are the kinds of players that are always like, one injury away from being a huge difference maker for you. I'm in a few leagues where like Tyler Algier is on waivers in like a 10-team league. He should not be on waivers in any leagues here. That's the kind of guy that if something were to happen to Bijan, it would be a league-shifting event because then you'd have a guy that maybe is a top 10 running back that's just on your roster for free. Those are the kinds of guys that need to be on rosters because they can dramatically change the outcome of your season. So if you have an empty roster spot, if you want to fill that up, filling it up with handcuffs is a really great thing to do there. Chuba Hubbard, likely rostered, but was absolutely fantastic this week. I think he'll be really good again in week 4, and who knows how long it's going to take Jonathan Brooks to come back. So if he's unrostered, he absolutely needs to be. CEH, just want to highlight him. Sounds like they're expecting him to return from the non-football illness list in week 5. We'll see what happens there. I don't necessarily expect him just to come back and be super involved in the offense, but he is a guy that's been in the system. It's not like Carson Steele was extremely impressive in week 3. Samaje Perine is by no means a world beater. There's potentially a role for CEH. I just want to say that, like, in deeper leagues, you should be added because he could potentially carve out a role. And there's a chance that CEH ends up being the guy there. I don't think it's going to happen, but we can't ignore that. He should probably be at least on our radars. Cam Akers gets the Jags next week if Joe Mixon can't go. Wasn't good this week, but the entire Texans team struggled like crazy. The Jaguars look like they're just dead. They're ready to roll over this season. Cam Akers could easily put up a really great game against them. And honestly, Cam Akers looked pretty good in the limited touches he had. I just don't think it really worked out for the Texans this week. So I don't think it was Cam Akers' fault. The production wasn't there this week. He at least bailed you out with the touchdown. If Mixon misses, I think Cam Akers could be a good start in week 4. Chase Brown looked pretty good, honestly, this last week. It looks like he's the faster, more explosive running back between him. Sorry about that. Chase Brown looks pretty good. Looks like he's the more explosive back between he and Zach Moss. Zach Moss is a good player. They're going to trust him in pass protection. So I wouldn't necessarily bury Zach Moss by any means, but Chase Brown's a good player. If anything happened to Zach Moss, Chase Brown would potentially be a workhorse running back on what should be a good offense. The Bengals aren't going to roll over. They're not going to give up on their season anytime soon. So Chase Brown needs to be rostered for sure. And then Alexander Madison, I think he has honestly a chance he's the starter in Las Vegas sooner than later. Samir White sucks. He's just not him. Can't catch passes, can't get the ball to get it in the end zone from the goal line. Alexander Madison's being given the goal line work and the pass catching work in this offense. Those are really the only touches we care about for fantasy. So Madison needs to be on rosters. Zamir White still should be rostered because he's a running back. He's getting some work, but I prefer Madison to Zamir White right now. Moving on to wide receiver here, Juwan Jennings. It wouldn't be a waiver video this week without talking about him. Obviously put up probably the game of his life last week. I'd be shocked to see him ever perform anywhere near that again. But he's a good player. He's been decent for them in the past. And there's an opportunity here with both Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey out here. And along with that, Brandon Ayuk does not look like he's himself right now. He's obviously still clearly working himself back into football shape. I think you could re-roll things here with Juwan Jennings in week 4. They're going to need him again. If you need to play him, if both George Kittle and Deebo Samuel are out again, which I think is very possible, Juwan Jennings would be not necessarily a must-start, but a guy that would be a solid like wide receiver 3 for me. Darnell Mooney clearly has a connection with Kirk Cousins, so I think we can play him next week as like a low-end flex play. The Falcons' offense, I think, is something that I think we expect to get rolling a little bit more and more over the course of the season. The arrow should be pointing up for them going forward, and I think that Darnell Mooney is just a really good player. I liked him a lot over the course of his career. He's the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense. It might be the number 2 target behind Drake London. I don't think Kyle Pitts is involved as people were hoping, so Darnell Mooney needs to be on more rosters for sure. Jacoby Myers was great in week 3. Devontae Adams, there's trade rumors circulating there that Antonio Pierce came out saying there were some business decisions made by players sort of when they were getting blown out. A lot of people think that was referring to Devontae Adams, not necessarily giving a full effort. If Devontae Adams were traded, Jacoby Myers would be a huge winner, and there's room potentially for Jacoby Myers to be a low-end flex play even with Adams there. This is a team that I don't expect to be very competitive. They could be playing from behind a lot, and Myers could put up some points in garbage time. Xavier Legette. Legette also needs to be highlighted here. We saw Adam Thielen leave the game with a hamstring injury. Sounds like he's going to miss some time here. Legette was the first pick the Panthers made this year. A good player, picked technically in the first round. We could see him potentially be involved going forward here. He's clearly the number 2 behind Deontay Johnson here, but if Andy Dalton elevates this offense, number 2 wide receiver on what could be an average offense needs to be rostered for sure. Demarcus Robinson, along with the rest of the Rams wide receivers, like I could highlight Robinson, Tutu Atwell, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington. I don't love any of them, but Robinson and Tutu specifically seems like the two that were at least the most involved in week 3. Tough to really trust any of it because I think it's going to be like a wide receiver by committee until they get Puka and Cup back. But if you needed to play one next week against the Bears, I think it would be Demarcus Robinson. Quentin Johnston scored again. I can't really trust him or see myself ever starting him just because this is a team that's not throwing the ball a lot. They play the Chiefs next week. That's not good. You get a bye in week 5. So I don't think you need to roster Quentin Johnston, but if you want to pick him up, I mean, you'd be super bold to play him against the Chiefs in a game where Justin Herbert might even miss. So I don't necessarily recommend picking him up, but keep an eye on him. He is a first-round talent that's played well the last 2 weeks. DeAndre Hopkins, probably rostered, but looked really good this last week. I don't know what necessarily to make of it. It's a little bit concerning for Calvin Ridley to see DeAndre Hopkins be this involved because we thought that Ridley was just a clear alpha. A little bit concerning there, but Hopkins should be rostered. He's a talented player. This is a team in Tennessee that's going to have to throw the ball a lot. They're going to turn the ball over, make a lot of mistakes. There is upside there, so Hopkins should be on more rosters. And then Jalen Nailor keeps producing. Sam Darnold's looked really good. I don't want to discredit anything Jalen Nailor's doing. He's a low-end flex play as long as Jordan Addison is out. Probably should be on rosters just a little bit more. He's looked good so far this season. Moving on to tight end here, actually some really good options here. I think tight end is like the best tight end waiver week we've had so far, and I'll start things off with Cole Kmet, who looked awesome. Hopefully there's no more Gerald Everett. I think that was the biggest thing with Cole Kmet. We saw Cole Kmet be honestly good for fantasy last season, and the reason I was off of Cole Kmet coming into the draft season is just because we saw in the preseason what happened to start the year where Gerald Everett was basically 50-50 splitting with Cole Kmet. Gerald Everett has followed Shane Waldron, the Bears offensive coordinator, basically all throughout his career. He was in Los Angeles with Waldron, and then he was also in Seattle with Waldron. Now he's in Chicago with Waldron here. So Shane Waldron really does like Gerald Everett, but Cole Kmet's just clearly the better player. Cole Kmet got a lot done with the opportunities he had this last week. I think he'd be my priority at the tight end position here. There's room for Caleb Williams to grow here. I think obviously throwing the ball 55 times is not something he's going to do every single week, but Caleb Williams is going to make a lot of mistakes. He's going to turn the ball over a lot, and that's going to lead to a lot of opportunities here for this passing offense to put up some really good counting stats, especially just because they can't run the ball at all. So Cole Kmet's a guy that I absolutely want to roster. He's a guy that I'd strongly consider just starting next week. He's a good player. If he ends up being the number 2 or even number 3 target in this offense with this kind of passing volume, he could very well be good this season. Dallas Goedert, he's the tight end 1 of the season right now. Not exactly like that's going to continue going forward, but they get a matchup against the Buccaneers this week. That doesn't scare us. And then as long as A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are out, which seems relatively likely for week 4, Dallas Goedert might be the tight end 1 in my rankings going into week 4. So he needs to be rostered if he happened to get dropped after week 2. Then Zach Ertz gets a matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, a little mini revenge game for him here in week 4, but good matchup. He's streamable. He's been involved. He's probably the number 2 target in this offense right now. Not a special player, but he's going to sit down in the middle of the field, catch the ball for 10 yards, and fall down. If he does that 4 or 5 times, that's a really good game for the tight end position the way we're getting it right now. So Zach Ertz can certainly be rostered and streamed, and you can probably get him for near free on waivers right now. And last, we'll go over some defenses here. Actually, quite a few options to highlight. I'll start things off with Pittsburgh. I doubt they got dropped, but maybe people were scared of the matchup with the Los Angeles Chargers. They have a matchup with the Colts in week 4. Anthony Richardson, we know he's turnover prone. The Steelers are probably going to make him turn the ball over a couple times. Steelers defense should be absolutely fantastic this week. Tennessee, they get to play Miami in week 4. We saw Miami be absolutely brutal in week 4, so that's a good matchup. And right on the other side of things, Miami gets to play Tennessee in week 4. Will Levis probably going to turn the ball over a couple times again. That's a good matchup, so you could certainly stream that option. Cleveland obviously didn't really work out this last week. The Giants sort of beat them up, but they play the Raiders in week 4. The Raiders just got absolutely stomped by the Panthers, so I think you can trust that. Cleveland is a good defense. I still think you can trust them against the Raiders. And then Dallas, they might have been dropped last week because they played the Baltimore Ravens. I know they've been really bad the last 2 weeks between their games against the Saints and the Ravens, so it's a bit of a risky play, but they play the Giants. I have a hard time believing the Giants are just going to lean on the Cowboys and beat them up, so if you want to play that option, I think we could see Giants just turn into a bit of a pumpkin again. Could easily see Daniel Jones turning the ball over a couple times and Dallas getting right back on track there. So Dallas is a decent streaming option as well if they're available. So that'll do it for the Week 4 waiver wire. Up next, I'll be going over some trade targets, so guys that I'm looking to trade for or trade away ahead of Week 4. Especially as we get further into the season, I think we have a lot more actionable advice. We've got a lot more information, a lot more data we can take into account when we're thinking about trades. A lot more we can think about in terms of upcoming matchups as well. the further we get into the season, the more we're going to know about just how good teams are and defenses are specifically at covering certain positions. That's going to really help us target advantageous matchups going forward, because that stuff really matters. And of course, you'll notice as we get closer to the end of the season, the middle of the season, I'm going to really start highlighting guys that have really good playoff matchups, because we want to target those guys. Obviously, we want to make the playoffs, but even more than that, we want to have good performances in the playoffs so that we can win those games. Those matchups are super important, and we're going to learn a lot over the next few weeks, along with what we already know. That's going to help us make some informed decisions about who's going to have really good opportunities to put up big games in the fantasy playoffs. So stay tuned for that. That's a super fun video for me to make. I love making those videos every week. I'm always one of the more active traders in all my leagues, so fun for me to make those videos. I tend to take my own advice. I'm happy to provide examples of trades I make as well in these videos. It's a lot of fun sharing all that with you guys as well. So yeah, stay tuned for that video. There will also be a start sit video coming out later this week, along with the Sunday morning live stream. All that stuff's going to happen every single week, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that. Click the notification bell so you get notifications when more videos come out. And then, of course, if you made it this far, please do give the video a thumbs up. It just helps me out and helps me know I'm doing a good job. So yeah, appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.